to the committee probably in June to discuss the funding request and the funding overage, because that would likely, with that amount of an overage, that would require county board approval. The other thing we'd like to mention is that the way the grant agreement was structured with the county and the state, the agreement does allow the DOT to require reimbursement of the federal grant portion of the design funds. And so with that, we our 20% match, and then with 80% match with the federal funds of $95,000, we would be required to reimburse the federal government $95,000 if we chose to not proceed with the project. So we wanted to bring this to your attention more as an information item now. And as I mentioned, we will likely be back before the committee, possibly in May, but likely in June with the bid opening amounts. No action required. It was more of a information update for you.
Do we have any costs occurred so far in design that the county has paid for?
Yes, we have approximately, I want to say $13,000 at this point.
And then is there a time limit on when this project can occur without having to reimburse the federal government saying we're not doing it? Do we have a certain?
So if the question is, can we, I mean, if we even drop the project now, we'd still be required to reimburse the federal portion.
Yeah. Let me lay out the dollars for you.
But is there a, if we were to say, put it off a year, is there a deadline that we have to use the funds by? Yes,
it would be next August of 2024. Yes.
So when we open the bids, it's going to be, more than likely it's going to be over what we have budgeted by some amount. You know, the bids on the government center project were really favorable. They were quite a bit under. So we could hope for the same thing, and that it's not $211,000 over what we have budgeted. So if it's something smaller, great. We'll ask for a budget amendment, ask for the additional funds. And if it is too large of a dollar amount and the county board says no, we're going to be out the $95,000, which is what we originally budgeted anyways. But that money is sunk cost because the design is 90% done. So at this point, let's finish the design and get the bids. We can always then take that design and reapply for another grant with a bigger dollar amount and then do the project in the future if we can get that grant then. So those are kind of the options that we're looking at as some of the next steps.
All right, any other questions? John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item, wow, it's financial report.
All right, so the financial report is for January of 2023. I'm actually not going to cover 2023. It's too new. Nobody cares about it yet. But we can focus, the 2022 column is still on here. It's the second column over. So if you take a look at that, really what I take a look at, so when I'm looking at these financial statements, I'm looking at 2022 to see where we're kind of ending up. So Register of Deeds, you look, it's got a bottom number of 177,351. So they've brought in more revenue than they had of expenses. So that's good. I don't bother looking at anything more on that one. So you can look at some of the other ones like recycling. They're negative by $1,986. That's probably close enough for government work. Yeah. Buck's not the only one that can make jokes. But I mean, that's relatively close. It's kind of on their trend line. They have no general property taxes. They have a fund balance. That's probably close enough to be absorbed within their fund. But this is how I take a look at the lines, and I'm looking at that 2022 column, and I'm scrolling down. Hazardous waste, they were 10,000 black. If we get to the Parks Department, if you scroll down on that one gives me a little bit of heart palpitations. So at 203,000 negative, I start looking more closely at what's going on there. So one of the things that's going on is, we had talked about it last month, but culture and recreation grants were budgeted at $190,000 and we're at $51,000. So it's not unusual for the grants to come in late, but I'm expecting another $140,000 of grants to come in, which would greatly offset that $200,000 negative line item. The other portion of that is net wages and fringes are over by about $45,000. That number's not going to change. They're over, and that's going to stay over. So somebody's going to get a talking to about that. But that's how I look at that, and that's what happens as we go down through these. So most of the other ones are going to be fairly easy. Fairgrounds, that's even 80,000. UW Extension, they're $12,000 in the black. Resource, land and water, they're negative 305,000. Similarly, it's pretty much all in the grants. They have over $300,000 that were expected on the grants. If that grant money comes in as projected, then that one is going to be fine. They also have fund balance applied. So fund balance applied only shows up in the budget column because what it says is if I budget $100,000 of fund balance applied, I expect a negative $100,000 number at the bottom. That means we used fund balance. So you can't really see that on the 2022 report anymore because that budget column falls off, but there was $100,000, I think, that was budgeted there also. So the fact that they end up in the red is completely expected on that one. Planning, land records, they're negative 17,000. Last year they were positive 18,000. Again, this one has no general property taxes. They're using fund balance. That's probably close enough. Zoning, they're 133,000 in the black, so we're all good there. Economic development, they're 847 in the red. So if you remember a couple years ago at the beginning of the pandemic, we did a bunch of economic development loans. The bank fees are just killing me here. But eventually those loans will get paid off, this will go away, but we're eating about $800, $900 a year in bank fees on those loans. And that's how I go through and I look at the financial statements, and that's where I see this section of cost centers. Any questions on any of that?
With these grants that are still coming in, do you have any, generally, you know, I know that you don't have a crystal ball on this, but when would we anticipate that we should be caught up with on most of that? Does it usually take about 6 months or so, or?
Not quite that long, but.
No, it doesn't take that long. In fact, Tim did a projection, and I don't have it with me right now, but we expect to have the majority of that money come in. In fact, we looked at it, and some grants we got over, we got supplemental, we got extra money, some grants we got a little less. Tim mentioned earlier that the one grant, he's going to probably have to have an extension because we weren't able to do as many projects as we hoped. So that one, it was under, but overall, I think we're going to come in really, really close on the, and all of those have been applied for. We're just waiting on the state to issue checks. And then with the other one, the Parks grant, that one is been applied for, and basically that was the grant related to, I think I mentioned this last month, the grant related to our new campground. And we could have probably sent that in a little sooner, but staff time wasn't really available to compile all the bills. But at any rate, it's been in since January, and so I expect to see the checks very soon. State sometimes sits on their money a little bit. That's a reality. And we have talked about that wages, and we have been working very hard, and the person has gotten a talking to from both Ken and I, so why that's happened. So.
Have we spent money against the grants that are on their way in on resources, land, water, conservation? And are we, when we forecast that, how does that work out in terms of we're sitting on an expectation? have we spent against the expectation, or are we waiting to spend until that grant comes in?
We only spend grants that have been awarded. We never spend speculatively. And we, all grant reimbursements are, a grant may cover multiple years, but we submit requests for reimbursement. Tim and I have talked about that also. Tim is going to start submitting those a lot sooner than he has been. Didn't really, some of them we don't have a choice. A big one that is the staffing grant we get for resource management every year. We don't really have a choice too much on when that one comes, and the state always waits until December 31st or January 15th or something like that before we get that one. It's just the way they like to do it. That one, I guess I would have to honestly say we do spend that, but most of these are reimbursement grants, so you have to spend the money first, but only after it's been awarded. We don't spend money if we don't get the grant.
So when Ellen used the terminology, she submitted the grant, she didn't submit the grant application, she submitted the grant reimbursement request.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
My turn. Thank you, Ken. Announcements and correspondence. Ellen, you want to go first?
Yep. So just for your information to share with friends, family, whomever, I'll just take one. And here is our free well and water nitrate screening clinic schedule for the year. So share that. Those will go out, of course, to town halls and those kind of places. Share them in other locations. And our new well and water testing educational brochure. So, and have to give a shout out to Tim and Brett and also Adam Mead, who is our water quality specialist, doing an excellent job of getting these things scheduled early, getting the word out, and creating the new brochure with assistance from our marketing specialist. So.
All right, excellent. I have been receiving a quarterly report from UW Extension, and I realize that you guys will probably find this really interesting. Do you get a copy of that?
No, but we can put one in the agenda.
Yeah, maybe I should. I don't. I just thought I'd just pass it out, let you have that. I've got a copy electronically. Just take that. And with that, that's all I have for correspondence. Requests for future agenda items. Anybody? Sean.
I have two. One is update on the Wildwood Trail situation would be great, and then a second one is I don't know why or something about the grandfathering and old addresses, if possible. Yeah, but I mean we won't just make the policy for 24th Street, right? We would establish it. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
We want to review the policy for changing addresses. My microphone wasn't on. I wanted to repeat that. Any other requests for agenda?
Yes.
One, Scott.
Didn't get the opportunity to talk before Buck left. I was trying to get in there at the end. But one of the things that I wanted to definitely commend him for all of his action, everything that he's done. Hopefully it can get him the message. But the other thing I wanted to discuss anyway was, as he was mentioning earlier too, is as the Board of Adjustment makes their decisions in cases, he said he would bring forth things where there's a repetition of issues that really may need to be addressed. And I'm just looking at that thinking, well, being on a proactive, they don't have that many cases where it would be nice to get the what their cases were in the decisions that they made and see if that would be something that we do need to discuss for future. And it's not to second guess them or anything that they've done, more so if there's a necessity for a policy change or, and if we did something like that, then we would be able to use our potential resources and staff to come in and say, well, this is, we should keep business as usual, or make a recommendation based off of that. So it's just a discussion point for a future meeting.
Okay, appreciate that. All right. That being that, date of the next meeting is Thursday, March 16, 2023, and I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you very much.